are coming to the end of the month of cyber awareness, and right now it's for us as users and employees to raise the bar of what we do from a cyber awareness perspective and how we can stop these cyber attacks. One of the stats that's running through my mind is $11.4 million a minute is being lost to nefarious bad people. And if we could slow that down, maybe our bonuses will be bigger. And data breaches continue to dominate the headlines. You know, it's these guys are just getting more and more ingenious in the way they get behind our security measures and get access to our data, to our employees, to our even our computing power. At the same time, we've got people that are in marketing and sales and operations that are driving the business. Data backup, recovery, protection solutions are often the bedrock of the business. I think globally, 43 billion is spent on data storage, $207 billion on data centers, and 7 billion just on information archiving. And as these data sets grow, as they do inevitably, and are being consumed in far-flung locations with this new trend of work from anywhere, we need data centers and access to data that can scale unlimited, but make it secure, that we know that the employees are working in the best way possible without having to look around for dark shadows and knives in the dark. You know, the world's data centers are about 1.327 exabytes of data. Now, an exabyte is 1 exabyte is 1 billion gigabytes. That is a massive amount of information. And we are considering that data centers are becoming even more prolific, with about 8 million worldwide. This is frightening, because Africa, I think, is just getting into the game and just extending our footprints. And people are making these decisions on where to take their own data centers or when to jump on someone else's. Companies are dealing with their own data in structured and unstructured format. The complexity of the data is just magnified by the size of it. The diversity of data is getting more and more as we add video, as we add live content. The problems are getting with bandwidth, getting bigger and smaller, and 5G and all of this complexity. Enter security at stage left. And ransomware as a service is now a real thing. Ransomware as a service. That's just shocking. The average demand from hackers has increased by 33% since 2019. It's on average $11,000 a ransom. Affiliates are even paid for it in this ransomware as a service. I just think that's so peachy. Hackers are now targeting mobile devices. Ransomware is evolving. Netwalker, DarkSide, Revil, all of these conglomerates coming together. And we need to be on top of this whilst still pushing the business forward. And I'm really excited with our panel today, because we've got a diversity of panel members. We have got people from marketing, and Thandiwe Mzila has joined us. She's Director of Marketing from IT Agility, one of our sponsors today. Thandiwe has held off having her special occasion, which she'll tell you about now, in order to join us today. Then we've got Andre Fourie, who is Director of Operations at Agility. He's one of the co-founders and been part of the team since 2011. And he's got huge experience in enterprise accounts, looking after big accounts and managing small accounts and making sure that their needs are met. And then from over the waters, we have Richard Spedding from Data Intelligence Technical Expertise at Hitachi Vantara. Richard's worked there for the last 13 years as a technical expert, focusing on data management and data intelligence. And he works with customers, so he's not set away in some dark room doing his own thing. And I'd really like to thank you all three for coming through today and giving us an hour of your time. Our attendees range from C-suite all the way through to operations. So if you throw 3-letter acronyms, I'm going to call you out. And I'm going to pick on my first guest just to say hi. Thandiwe, what is your special occasion that you've held off just to be with us?
Hi, thank you so much, Daniel. Thanks to the panelists, thanks to the attendees. I'm really grateful to be here. So what exactly do I do at ITJ? Just summarized it for me. I'm the marketing executive. also part of the management team, also getting involved in other areas such as product development and taking new offerings to market. So I'm more like a door opener for IT agility, making sure that the relationships are well managed.
And what's happening in a couple of weeks in your life?
Couple of weeks, I'll be giving birth. So I'm highly pregnant currently. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
So no tough questions that are going to shock her into labor, please. But keep your questions through. Use the Q&A or the chat. That would be awesome. Thanks, Tadiwe. Andre, you've come through and given us some time. IT operations. What does your day look like? What do you do in your day from IT agility perspective?
Yes, thank you, Daniel. Thanks for the panelists and the audience as well for their time. I know obviously time is very valuable. From my side, in IT agility, I oversee all operational aspects of the company strategy, obviously improving efficiency, productivity, quality, and managing risk. I also help set strategic goals and is responsible for the flow of operation information to our CEO and the board. Awesome. On a daily basis, we're planning and monitoring the day-to-day running of the business to ensure that there's smooth progress happening. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you, Andre. And then Richard, our guest from all over the waters, tell us that you're not a Man U fan, that you were just teasing me.
No, I wish I could. I've been a Man United fan probably since I was about 6 or 7.
Okay. So you're not a fair weather supporter.
Oh, I am. No, I absolutely am. I live at the other end of the country. We call them. They're called the phrase is a plastic mank, because I don't often get to go to see games or matches or anything like that. But I do. I'm more of a rugby man, to be honest.
Oh, fantastic! You've just won my heart.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
There we go. So yeah, I tend to enjoy rugby at the weekends rather than football. Or if you ever want to wind up a football fan, you just call it. I always call it soccer.
Yeah, soccer. It's such a soft game. And what do you do at Hitachi? You've been there 13 years. You must be enjoying it.
Yeah, so it's a great place to work, and we've kind of seen the evolution of object storage becoming part of people's day-to-day storage technologies that they go to. So I actually started with if anyone remembers optical drives, small tape drives, repairing those, and then came over and
you're showing your age, buddy.
Yeah, I've worked from I worked for Legato and EMC, because EMC acquired them, and Documentum as part of that. But yeah, I've had a good long session at Vantara, and because I really believe in what we do, we do a very good job for our customers. So it's nice to have something that you can believe in every day when you go to work.
And I think that's been the common thing that's come through in this last month. Kerry and I do a number of webinars and podcasts with security people and storage people and IT people. And often in the shadows, we get these people that are driving passion in the business, but quite often overlooked from a limelight perspective. So I just want to put a high five to all of you for what you're doing in the IT industry. That's brilliant. I'm going to start with quite an easy question for you, Richard. On the title, it's how do we counter these ransomware attacks or even stop them? Is there any way to effectively counter cyber attacks or avoid them?
I think you had alluded to it right at the start, Dan. These are the biggest problem with cyber attacks is they come from organized crime syndicates. So this is not just a guy sat in his darkened room in his bedroom. These are big, you alluded to it, as a service deliveries for these types of things. So there's two things that I guess are very important as part of that. They're not going to go away. I think they become a part of our day-to-day problems of management. And every time we counter something, the attackers find a way around it. They find a different way through. They'll constantly be 2 or 3 steps ahead of us. So we really have to stay on the ball, and it involves everybody from the start of the cleaner coming in the morning, right up to the CXO levels. Everybody is a part of the solution, I think.
One of the stats that you gave out in our prep was 1,097 ransomware attack in the first half of 2021. And that was the total of 2020 that were, I mean, it's just frightening at how quickly they're increasing. And it used to be that we read about it in the newspaper. Now we talk about it in roundtables where it's happened to our friends and colleagues. So it really is in the forefront of business. Are you seeing the same in the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. And I work all over the region as well, and we are seeing the same everywhere. So we kind of get to that point where I think everybody sees it as a problem, and anybody I talk to, all of the customers I go into, if you get them to rank in their top 5, ransomware will always be in there, and it's normally either 1 or 2 or 3 up there. So it's everywhere.
So if the assumption is if not, I mean, not if, but when, how do we suggest we pick up the intrusion the quickest? Andre, do you have any practical ideas on this?
Yes, Dan, very interesting question. So obviously you need multiple layers of security just to make it a little bit more challenging for the intruders. You would also, want to keep an eye on your logs, your system logs, to try and observe if there are any anomalies in your environment. It will be good to invest in something like SIEM, security information and event management, which is basically captures all your event data from a variety of sources across the organization and the entire network. That logs and flow of data from end users, applications, assets, cloud environments, and so forth are collected, stored, and analyzed in real time. So if there's something abnormally happening in your environment, you will be able to pick it up, and hopefully you can do something about it before you suffer a ransomware incident. So what these SIEM tools or software doing, it can sort your data into categories such as successful logins and failed logins. So if you get a scenario where someone logged in and they get a failed login, then you'll assume that that's reasonable. But when you have say 130 failed logins in a space of 2 minutes, then you will know maybe someone is trying to brute force into your environment, and that should alert you to investigate and verify that it's not malicious attempt to get into your environment. Obviously, the SIEM can also identify malware, so that you pick it up early so it doesn't spread through your whole environment. That will allow you to have time. Your security teams will then have an opportunity to look at it and do something about it. So as we said earlier, Daniel, there's nothing you can do. There's multiple ways of these guys getting in. It's for you to be disciplined, look at your logs, understand what it means, and you can't do it manually. We have to use technology, because the amount of information that is out there, it's just impossible to manage manually. Because as I said, if you use the software, you will then you identify, and you can obviously raise an alert. So
I think that's a really good point. I want to circle back to that, Andre. We've got a couple of questions that came through, and I thought Andre Billy's question, if I pronounce it right, Andre, if I haven't, I'll buy you a beer next time I see you. And Andre was saying, what is your view on ISMS governance compliance frameworks such as the NIST-CSF or the broader level ISO 27001? And I think that when we're answering your question, how do we pick up intrusions? I'd like to carry on Andre's question and say, are these frameworks up to date to help you on a paint by numbers to detect intrusions and stop them? Is the governance frameworks that have been put in place, are they keeping up with what we need?
Daniel, did you write that question to me? Unfortunately, we've got load sharing here, and it just came back. So, you know, I just
that's fine. Richard, I wouldn't mind your opinion on that from a global perspective. Are the compliance frameworks that are helping us and are out there, are they helping us protect and detect, or are they 2 steps behind what we need today?
I think anything that is a good framework is important, but from what I've seen so far, it seems to be across the rest of Europe, certainly, it seems to be that people are fairly well on their own. So the frameworks they introduce would tend to come from an organization or a business or a partner, rather than necessarily from a government regulation type of position.
Okay, cool. I quite like that. What I said to Andre was, if we didn't answer it correctly like he wanted, we'll just get back to him after this session. Andres, you've answered quite a bit about automation. You've answered about putting layers of security in the way we detect and analyzing logs and looking at the data. Is it not tempting for customers to overprotect their data, Tandiwe? Have we not knee-jerked their protection and spent the whole budget on security now? Tandiwe, are you there?
Sorry, guys, I lost you for a sec. Daniel, can you please repeat the question? We lost connection this side a bit. Apologies about that.
That's okay. Have customers knee-jerked to protect their data? Have they overprotected their data today?
Okay, thanks for that question. Apologies again, I couldn't hear in the first time. Well, if we look at our experience, like in general, we found that customers focus on 2 aspects, which is backup and replication. It's always been like that. And if you break it down from those components, let's start with backup. When it comes to backup, they do backup. Some customers do backups from disk to tape, and then others disk to disk, you know, depending on how their infrastructure is designed, you know. But when it comes to backing up to tape, there are obviously the pros and cons. If you're backing up to tape, you do have some sort of like an isolation. We call it a air gap if the tapes are vaulted offsite. Obviously, from a network perspective, they are isolated. So you have that protection, you might call it, but physical tapes are prone to I/O errors over time. Like when they come to be delivered, they can overheat from whatever method of collection is used or corrupted, you know. And sometimes tapes recovery becomes slow or time consuming because the sequential approach. And after, sometimes from a hardware compatibility might be an issue. If, for example, the tape version that you're using is not compatible to maybe the hardware refresh that you've already done, you know. But looking at backing up to disk, it's quite different. I mean, backing to disk increased performance often requires offsite, you know. And replication to protect against site failure, right? From your primary side to the DR side. And then backup data on disk is exposed to intentional corruption or distractions. So generally from an RTO and RPO perspective, for those who doesn't understand RPO and RTO, we're talking about a recovery time objective, which is the amount of time required to recover your data. And your RPO is more of how much data can you allow your company or be at the position to accept that you have lost, you know. But it's mostly greater than 24 hours due to the nature of unstructured data that you have. So yeah, and when it comes to replication, very few customers are replicating their critical data because it's the, you know, it's the asset to the business. but that a replication does not protect against intentional corruption and destruction.
Okay, that's interesting. So we are seeing some level where customers are just over protecting data, but some of it where they're missing the points a little bit. We've got 4 questions that have come in, and they're kind of aimed at you, Richard, which is got a papaya and a GDPR take on them. So I'm just going to smash them out, go off piste here. Jeffrey has asked if Hitachi Data Management assists with papaya compliance and can it demonstrate them. Then the very next one is huge. Wade has said, we've seen big corporates like Amazon fall short of their GDPR compliance. What are the parallels with papaya and key takeaways that can help ensure the relevant controls are in place? And then Anonymous, who I don't generally read their questions, as I said, though this Anonymous was actually quite a good one, is ISO 27001 a silver bullet if followed to the letter? So Richard, I'm just going to toss a big Hail Mary to you and see if you can answer those 3 in 1. How's that?
I think it's a very interesting point, because the two almost go hand in hand.
They do, don't they?
Anybody who is perhaps phishing for information or threatening ransomware attacks is often in a position where they can quite comfortably make public privacy-based information. So information that you should be protecting through papaya, right? So the two are very naturally entwined in each other. I think what we found with our customers, and just for relation outside of South Africa, it would be GDPR in the rest of EMEA. The processes and principles and guidings are pretty well the same, that we protect any data that is in our responsibility. And then the definitions of what's our data, what's private, become a little bit different in regions and stuff. But I think the important piece is, and we do this with a lot of our customers, is I always go back to the fact that there is product, process, and people involved all the way through, right? I loosely call it the 3 Ps. But you said you were going to lambast me if I used a TLA.
No. Because you can explain it, you got away with it.
So there is things that we do in Hitachi Vantara, and by the way, as the wider group, you all guys may know that Hitachi Vantara is part of the Hitachi group. Around security management. We deal with solutions that can centralize data and give you single sources of truth. We have solutions that can go out and look perhaps in unstructured data and structured data to find what data may contain papaya-based, privacy-based information. We even do some solutions where you start to consider, I want to do analytics on my data, but I have to pseudonymize that data. I have to perhaps make it so that people know that I am analyzing a person who is of a certain age, of a certain gender, but they can't be able to trace back that it's Richard, or it can't be able to trace back that it's somebody, somebody else. So we do solutions all around all of those things.
So we walk a fine line, because Papaya is saying, why have we collected the data? What is the use of the data? And do we know, and does the person know about it? We've acquiesced, we've said yes. So you're saying that there's solutions around that once we've captured that data, that if we anonymize it, you can still get the trending, you can still get the market reporting, but you won't be infringing on the Papaya side. And I think that's what Jeff was asking about. His next question is almost, I think, for you, Andre, with Richard, was, does IT Agility have a holistic data governance strategy that takes into account HCP, product, people, and process? He actually said, how does one create a holistic data governance strategy? And I wanted to know, either from Andre Tandiwe or yourself, Richard, do you have a paint by numbers that someone can fast track their creation of a data governance strategy that takes these into account? Or is it a new experience every time we engage with a customer? Andre, do you want to take that and then we can throw it around?
Thank you, Richard. Yes, so with data governance, the first thing you obviously have to do is you have to take control of your data. You have to bring it under control, and you have to secure your data. On top of that, you need to know where your data is located. What's the source of your data, classification of your data, who has access to the data, and what the contents of the data. So as you can see, Daniel, it's quite involved. It's not one fit for everything. So it's a lot of people involved, as Richard also mentioned, that it's people, processes, and technology for that matter.
But your first starting point. Your first starting point is to do an inventory and audit of what data you've got, where it is, and who's accessing it. That's the foundation for this governance strategy. Is there a way to automate this, or is it? It sounds like it's quite a manual thing. What have you seen customers doing?
Well, so if you look at that, Daniel, I mean, if you look at the Hitachi data management portfolio, they've got those capabilities built in, so you can use the technology to assist you with automating all of that.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Richard, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, it becomes an interesting conversation. So historically, if you go, we said at the start, I'm an old timer at this. Historically, we used to keep data because we knew we had to, but there was a good chance that we'd never need it, right? So that was going back to my optical storage days, showing my age. Where we get to now is we have to be selective about what we do and we don't keep, and we have to learn to classify data. And to your point earlier about what an exabyte of data looks like, and that a lot of data these days is unstructured or semi-structured, we have to automate it because we cannot manually classify these things. So there's some interesting tech that we've got around, we call it Lumada data catalog, but the ability to use AI and machine learning to develop a fingerprint for what data looks like. So I can tell, because I've just received something that has a bank account detail in or a personal name in it, I know next time what to look for, right? This is what machine learning is. And AI, this is what they do. So we generate these thumbprints or fingerprints around a data pattern, and we can uniquely identify stuff. But as you do machine learning, of course, you have to educate, and part of that education is much about, I guess, crowdsourcing of data and what good looks like. So Daniel, just because you define something as correct or containing personally identifiable information doesn't necessarily mean that that's right. If 10 people say it's right, it's probably right. You get that sort of idea with machine learning. So we've got some nice tech around that. And again, process, procedure, all of those things.
In the chat, Portia Similani has raised another question. Sorry, Tandiwe, I'm coming to you. What is a reasonable time for security teams to investigate the alerts from SIEM? And it's almost, with the learning that's going on, we should get to a point where we're continuously shortening that cycle, because the machine is learning what the behavior should be and therefore can react quicker. That's very exciting. Tandiwe, did you want to add something in there?
Yes, I was going to say, at the end of the day, the driver to data governance is security. Speed and access to data, as well as mandatory compliance requirements, obviously introduce a huge amount of cost, which is something that an organization needs to obviously consider, when looking at compliances and how to obviously gather your data to make sure that it's secure.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Is, Daniel, sorry, cost is an interesting point, because security and data governance generally is a cost center. It doesn't make you any money. It's a threat to you that you have to protect against. So again, going back to the point about, if you've got all that data anyway, and you want to use it, you need to find useful, valuable ways to get that data so that it makes you money rather than costs you money or helps your business. Right.
I think we've got to circle back to that, Richard. But can I get a straight answer from someone on Portia's question? What is a reasonable time for security teams to investigate the alerts? I mean, it's coming. I have an answer, but it's a little bit glib. Go, Andre.
Yeah, so Daniel, I mean, obviously, the minute your solution or your software alerts you, it's obviously important that you attend to it immediately. Okay? Hence the driver for automation to these alerts. So when you start investigating the alert, you will then, obviously your team will have enough experience to identify whether this is urgent or it's something that like that's happening in the environment that won't do any damage. So it's a matter of what the security teams observe and if it's really going to hurt the organization, then obviously they will try and resolve it as quickly as possible.
Awesome.
I mean, obviously it's a bit of a wide question.
It is a wide question. It's a great question. Thanks, Portia. But just because you were first to the ball, I'm going to send you the next one. You've been architecting solutions and companies for a number of years now. How do we architect our data to limit the impact of a breach? So we accept it's coming in. These are actually going to break down the walls. The defense might be better than Man United's, as not as porous, but they're still going to get through. How do we architect to minimize the impact on our data, Andre?
Yes, so Daniel, thanks for that question. So obviously we know that we're dealing with data that's growing exponentially, and it will continue to do so. I think Richard mentioned earlier on about structured data and unstructured data. So you need to be able to understand your data, unstructured or structured. Then in terms of what also happening nowadays is that the data don't just exist in the data center anymore. It's now on the mobile phones, the laptops, and so forth. So if you can have a good security posture within your data center, but if you don't protect your endpoint devices, your sensitive data might be out there. So you need to encrypt your data to make sure that your mobile data, your portable data, so that you obviously, if something happens to that device, your sensitive data is still protected. And when so that will limit your exposure from the data outside of. I'm just talking out very, very high level. Trying to protect your data, because there's nothing you can do. 28% of today's data is sitting outside of the data center. Only 72% sits in the data center. So hence you need to, as part of your architect, how you're gonna manage and protect your data, you have to bring in the mobile devices in your laptops. Because with the COVID scenario as well, there's obviously a huge increase in working from home. This just gives the hackers another opportunity to increase their, how can I say, revenue pot. I would get.
It's almost fatalistic. It's almost like we are going to get breached. There is something that we are, especially in this month. If you haven't heard, we're coming to the end of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Come on, let's do our bit. But if we are looking at the areas of control that we have, we can manage a number of areas in the attack surface just by looking at our data and how we're looking at our data. And that should limit the impacts. If they get into one area, let's keep them in that area. And I think that's when I was doing some of the research into this discussion, Hitachi's got some great solutions around that, which is nice to see that technology is keeping up. That being said, Richard, what are the most common areas or methods where ransomware is introduced into an environment? How do these guys get in there?
Often it is at the human level. So what would understand in terms of phishing. There's also, of course, these denial of service attacks and things that you see Facebook and stuff going through all the time. But you know what's the key is actually there's a good chance that a ransomware bot or software has got into your system before you've realized as well, right? So and that in itself is a problem, because you start to have to consider how far back do you have to go to recover to a point where that ransomware was not in your system as well. But yeah, often to answer the question, it is often through phishing and things like that, and we occasionally get these dummy spoof mails from our IT department even, just checking that everybody is still very aware that phishing does exist. Yeah, surprise.
Tandiwe, you don't do that for customers. Hey, you don't do, I mean, you're looking at the data and the data around it. You don't do pen tests and try and hack into their organizations or that.
No.
It's not a service. So you would look at how we build the solutions.
Yeah. So if you look at from an IT perspective, how we approach our engagements with our customers, we tend to become more of a trusted advisor rather than someone who comes and make a sale. So we want to invest in your environment. So how we approach it from a consultative leading approach is we have different interviews with different stakeholders within a business, just to get an understanding of where the business is and where the business want to go. And what we do, we focus on the gap between, from a roadmap perspective, to say, okay, this is where you are, this is where you want to be. How do we close this gap to take you where you want to be? And we look at all the aspects from an infrastructure, from your cloud journey, security, all those aspects, we bring them together, and we form kind of like a solution that will obviously work for your business, because we believe that each and every business is very unique, and it's always been our approach, we become more proactive than reactive. So we tend to make sure that customer make sure that they tend to avoid many unexpected, incidents, like in the data center security and all those in advance, and it always been working for us. I mean, we've been in the industry for years now, and if you look at our portfolio, we're very broad, we now have recently launched our cloud initiative, where we focus on DR as a service, backup as a service, and software as a service. All those things, like they help us.
Ransomware as a service.
Well, it's one of the things that are in the
Daniel,
Andre.
Yeah, just to add on to that, Daniel. So obviously, when we work with our customers, if we don't have the particular like skill set, we've got other partners that work with us and like to obviously address our customers' concerns and help them.
You just step up to the plate, Andre. It's just nice. Give me a ranking of importance when Tandiwe is going into a new organization and we're busy having a look at their data and where they're going, and we're putting a roadmap. Which is the most important? Data protection, data backup, or data recovery? Are they on one system or are they handled on different systems?
Yeah, so Daniel, obviously data protection is the process of securing digital information while keeping the data usable for business purposes. Again, protecting information from unwanted access, theft, and corruption from the moment the data is created until destruction or deletion. From my perspective, data protection is important. Then, because if you don't have if your data is not protected, if you back the data up, then you are going to recover data that's not usable. So I would say data backup and recovery is more a subset of data protection. Because
so it all filters from data protection. Why have we got this data? How do we secure it? And then it filters from. I like that. That's a nice answer. Thank you. We've got 3 more questions that have come through and been sitting here. Anonymous, you better put your name on. I'm not asking you again. Is ISO 27001 a silver bullet if followed to the letter? I think the person means to the letter. And that's just a yes or no. Yes or no? Come on, Tandiwe.
I'll give that to Andre.
Oh, good. Nice. I like that.
Look, Daniel, from my side, I'm not. I wouldn't say, like. So obviously, it's difficult to say it's a silver bullet. So you have to, like, understand your customers and to really. So it's difficult. I would be neutral on that until we spoke to our customers and see how to apply that, because maybe saying a silver bullet now, then it's not working.
No, I like that. That's a very good Andre answer.
But also, Daniel, to add into that, we always follow best practices. Like Andre said, we work with our vendors, like Hitachi, for example. We follow best practices. So engaging with our customer in the early stage will help us to understand where they want to go,
Okay, I like that. So we layer things so that we leave no holes for the customer's data to fall through. I think that's a really good idea. And the worst thing that I see is people wheel spinning. They don't know where to start. Where the legislation certainly gives you a place to start. My next one. This is a very good question from Wade Griffin. I'm not sure who you are, but I like your question. Your organization's data is a strategic asset. Yes, we accept that. What core, and I'm going to put a limit on it, 3 questions should you consider that will anchor the purpose of your data strategy plan, which wasn't in Wade's question. Richard, that's definitely for you. What are the 3 first questions we should be asking when we are looking at your data?
I think not necessarily in any particular order, but one of those questions is, should that data be there? One of those questions probably would be, how can I get value from that data? And probably the third one would be, is there anything in that data that I should not, or I should be protecting via Papaya, things like this? Those would probably be the 3 that I would pick off the top.
Summarize them. That's our sound bit for today. Come on, do it again, Richard. Do it again.
Do it again. Right.
Yeah.
So the first one is, what's in that data, I guess. Okay. Should that data be there? And then does that data contain anything that I have to protect in a specific way? I love that.
Tandiwe, you looked like you wanted to answer on there as well.
I actually agree with Richard. I was actually thinking about it, from a Papaya perspective, should that data be there? I mean, if for example, as a company, if you have someone who has left, and from a compliance perspective, are you allowed to keep that data, and for how long?
Okay.
Those are the things that you need to consider.
I really like that. I like that. And building on that, now we've got these cloud hybrid. We've got data centers that are, we've got space in, we've got our own data centers, we've got cloud applications in there. What are the challenges that face comprehensive backup solutions in this world today? What don't I know about, Andre?
So Daniel, obviously cloud's got a presence and reason within the ICT space. It allows you to be a little bit more agile, in the ICT industry, we obviously have resource constraints and so forth. So if you can offload a specific function where you don't maybe have the skill to the cloud, but obviously with the cloud, it's a business. One of the things that we see is the cost associated with storing your data in the cloud. I'm talking about backup data. If you don't control the data, you will obviously use up a lot of cloud space. It will cost you money. The other thing is as well, so when you have to do a recovery, the cost associated with bringing your data back, some cloud providers don't charge you to ingest data, but when you take your data from from the cloud, you have to probably pay for that month to make sure that you're going to have an increase in your spend bringing the data from the cloud. But as I said, like it's got a special place. Not everything, and if you've got most of the solutions today as well, your backup solutions do provide data dedupe and compression. So it should significantly reduce that, like your amount of data going to the cloud. The other option is obviously to archive your data in the cloud to archival storage, which is a little bit cheaper than the S3 bucket storage.
Awesome.
The next thing as well is if you look at it, getting your data into the cloud, you need a bandwidth, like a network bandwidth. If your network bandwidth is not of the appropriate size, you will actually obviously delays, your backups will take long, and so forth. So that if you've got aggressive RTOs, that can affect that. I'm sure Richard can add to this as well.
Yeah, no, I think one thing to add, Andre, is just because it's in a cloud, don't assume that it's been backed up and there's multiple copies of data. It's probably protected, but not necessarily backed up with multiple copies. Do you think that's a fair statement, Andre?
Yes, I agree.
So read your contract, read your contract. Trust is no control. Okay, I like that. There's lots of wisdom there, Andre. I've got a parking lot backup like William Nicol, which is a road here. Richard, you don't need to know it. Get back up.
I do know it. I know it very well.
Good.
Yeah.
Come on. We got traffic here of questions. We've got Rishen, Etienne, John, Etienne. I'm going to get to them now, but just want to call out Tabang and say thank you for not being on the mouse anymore. Tabang says they were his questions, so they were darn good questions. And then just a mic drop from Ahmed, who says the InfoSec principle states prevention is ideal, but detection is a must. And lastly, prepare for the inevitable. So even InfoSec is saying, listen, guys, this is going to get real. Know what you're going to do about it. So that is a good segue into Rishen's question, which is saying, the last 24 months, we've been slapped by a world that's changed. Economic pressures are under us. We're sweating our assets by keeping old hardware alive, which are beyond OEM support. Okay, I don't like that. But how do these companies deal with security? And security in context of their data? I'm not sure who wants to take that. Should we eeny, meeny, miny, Richard?
I think one thing is I would never expect anybody to have stuff that's out of support or old, and we constantly go through those negotiations with our customers to make sure what they have is in support. And the reason for it is because as a manufacturer, our firmware and software does not always support to the latest of vulnerabilities and stuff. If the kit's old, right? So we talk about CVEs, common vulnerability exposures and things like that you would find from your pen testing and things. And actually, it's very hard as a manufacturer to go back over multiple generations of different pieces of equipment. So if you are sweating those assets, I guess you need to make sure that you are working with your manufacturer to ensure that they are continually protected to the levels that you need them protected to. Right.
Okay. Andre? Oh,
yes. So, I mean, obviously, Daniel, the hackers know they're looking for weaknesses. Okay, so if you're running with unsupported software or hardware, you're opening yourself up for trouble. You can do all other work in like you can, like your different layers, but remember, the hackers only need one vulnerability or weakness in your environment and put you through a lot of pain.
So what's your advice for them? Keep up to date, read the vulnerability.
Yeah,
you've got to spend that money.
Yeah, it's costing money, but you will be it will be money well spent, and you will be able to at least fight off these guys. If you don't do that, you suffer a cyber incident, chances are, if you're lacking in keeping up with maintenance, you're probably lacking somewhere else as well, which will then put you in a position where you've got no choice but to negotiate with the hackers. 36% of people of companies that suffered cyber incidents obviously negotiate with the hackers. A worrying 17% never get all the data back, even after they've paid for the ransom amount. So it's critical, guys. I know it's costing, but this is real. This I mean, you can be out of business.
Yeah. We've got to pause because we've got 8 minutes left. We've got a very special John there who's not turning on his camera because he's probably in his cozy. John, good morning. You've got a question for the panel.
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. In fact, I'm running between meetings this morning.
Oh, you're not in your cozy. Okay, good.
Yeah, I had a security meeting this morning, and further than that, I can't say, and that sort of took up time. So I literally had to join from my mobile phone.
Go ask your question, Mr. Bosco.
So I think the questions I have is twofold, right? So the first question, I posted it on the group in terms of, are we talking about PAPIA and all these other pieces of legislation, right? But how do we deal in a, like, for argument's sake, in a government context, right, where I've got a piece of legislation that says government information must be kept for 20 years. I've got a PAPIA legislation that tells me to keep it for 3 years, depending on the classification. And then I've got another piece of legislation that tells me that that data should be accessible to the citizens because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when I look at the citizens, I'm always dealt with multiple personality disorders between them, because the guy is a citizen, he's a resident, he's an account holder. So he covers all the areas from debt to finance to shareholder of the city itself. And how do we then manage those discrepancies, in terms of compliance, from a compliance and data perspective in a government context where we have these misalignments?
It's such a great question, John. It's such a great question. Go, Richard.
It's a horrible question. Do you know what we used to say probably 5 to 10 years ago, because it was more viable to say it? Which one are you going to get the biggest fine from? And I say that a little bit of a tongue in cheek, but more when we're talking about PAPIA, this is about protecting data that could cause a personal problem to somebody, and we don't know what that personal problem is. So I have an opinion that probably the PAPIA and the GDPR things should override all others, in my opinion. However, that is my opinion, because I see protection of citizens as the most valuable thing that any organization should be trying to do. But like I say, I'm caveating that with that is my opinion. Right.
Tandiwe or Andre, do you have an answer on that as well? Because I love that.
Yeah, so Daniel, from my side, I agree with Richard. If you think about it, you can have the data, but the people are working with the data. So protecting data, protecting people is the ultimate. Because with no people, you can have the data, but
you have no business without people, right? Without customers.
So I like the way the fact that everybody is grappling with this, and we've still got to secure the data. We are wrapping up. I usually wrap up with the same 3 questions for my panelists, but I don't think we have the time for it. So Richard, I'm going to start with you as our offshore attendee. What are you most excited about, which is coming from technical release from your stable, from Hitachi, in the next 6 months? What don't we know about, which is coming in?
So you'll have seen, again, I'll keep it brief, but you'll have seen perhaps in the press that Hitachi Vantara has made a number, and Hitachi Group as well, made a number of acquisitions around the data and the IT type of space. And in the next probably three to 6 months, all of those acquisitions are starting to come together to deliver meaningful solutions to these customer problems. So that's why I get out of bed in the morning.
Awesome. You better come and visit us soon. Andre, what's your focus from an IT agility perspective for the next quarter, taking us into calendar end of January from your perspective?
Yeah, so Daniel, as Sanjeev mentioned earlier, we've obviously launched our cloud offering. So we'll be very busy promoting that and like obviously try and visit customers and see how we can help customers, because most of the customers today do have a cloud strategy, like whether it's hybrid or full cloud. We as a business will definitely increase our target area for that as well. And the other thing as well, I mean, we as an organization as well. So we busy with our papaya readiness as well, and that also takes time. So yeah, that will keep me busy at least. Also together with my existing roles.
Awesome. Thandiwe, probably the most difficult question for you. What would you say to a young person coming into the data market which you're playing in, or the security of the consulting market? What would you say to them as the first 3 steps in getting to where Thandiwe is, or Andre is, or Richard in their career? How do they start this?
Well, from my side, I mean, I started in 2007 as a graduate, and to where I am, I'll give 3 advices. Decide what industry and technologies you are mostly interested in. Learn from other people's experiences to avoid making the same. So be more teachable and stay up to date or relevant with technology to advance your knowledge and continuously learning.
That's excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Thandiwe, Andre, and Richard. This has been a really interesting discussion, and the time has flown by. We've had one TLA which Richard threw out, but he knew what it was. So that's amazing. Thank you. I just want to encourage you as an attendee, if you want to reach out to Andre, Thandiwe after she's had her maternity leave, or Richard after his mourning period for his devastating loss on Sunday, please reach out on LinkedIn, connect. We make business through connections, so get to know one another. And from my side, allowing me to facilitate this has been really a great pleasure on my side. Thank you for bringing